Hey everyone, I'm Clive.
Hey, I'm Louis.
And today we're going to talk about the online BIM execution planning workflow. A lot to cover. So one of the things that we'll talk about is, first of all, why plan? Why would we need to plan in the first place?
You always need a plan.
Surely you need a plan. But sometimes, even when you have a plan, it can be a challenge. So we've looked at why there's certain challenges in planning workflows in relation to BIM.
And a lot of these challenges are what we hear on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and what we struggled with when we were BIM managers ourselves.
Yes.
So very much identify with the challenges and the problems. But what we'll talk about, what the exciting part is, what if. So we'll talk about what if we had something that would cope with some of those challenges, and we'll talk about really in detail what that means for you guys as well. And then Louis will introduce the online BIM execution planning platform, and you can see how simple and quick and easy it is. And then we'll have a little preview of what's coming very soon as well, so stick around. And as Louis said earlier, any Q&A, if you have any questions, just type them in. Louis will be responding, tap, tap, tap on the side as we go through the webinar.
Yeah, and if I don't answer your question, I will respond after the webinar.
There you go. All right, so let's get started. Everyone understands that BIM is used for many different things. We're not going to talk in depth about these, but there's a plethora of different uses that you could use a model for. And we know that it can save us a lot of time, a lot of money in everything from design through construction and operations. But the big challenge is, how much BIM do we need and when do we need it? These images depict a great model, both ends of the spectrum, but which one do we need? We don't want to model too much, do we?
No, and you definitely want to get it right, because the one on the left compared to the one on the right, it's a huge cost difference. So definitely get it right.
Massive time and cost difference. Yeah. So what do we need? What do we need in order to be able to do this? Well, a lot of professionals around the world have made it standard practice now to create a plan. And those plans are what has been commonly known as a BIM execution plan. And they come in lots of different flavors. We have many different guidelines and many different really useful formats and templates around the world.
Globally known standard bodies, but some even from education.
Different university bodies,
universities.
Lots and lots of really useful information. And what people tend to do with it is create Word documents, use Excel files and different project management tools, and end up in PDFing, and then sometimes different other types of new project management tools depending on what type of workflows you're using. It can become a challenge, because what we see in the industry is, once we've created this great BIM execution plan, where does it go?
What happens?
What happens to it? Yeah. Unfortunately, sometimes it ends up being placed in the bottom drawer and it gathers cobwebs, and it's not unfortunately brought out and used and collaborated on until there's a big problem, until there's some kind of dispute or some kind of disagreement in what was included and what wasn't included in that workflow, or who is responsible for something or who isn't responsible for something. There's a serious challenge when it comes to resolving those matters when it's too late. So that's great. We could have a BIM execution plan, but if we've got one and it's not used, then we may as well not have one.
I hope your cabinet files don't look like that.
So let's talk about making the impossible possible, and the challenges that we see in this workflow that we need to resolve in order for that to become a reality. Yeah. So there's many of them, bear with us. But so we talked about there, usually they're a Word document or some form of PDF. Usually they're created by one person. Unfortunately, what happens is we're copying and pasting from previous versions, and what that means is it causes unrealistic expectations to be carried forward. Sometimes not every project is going to adopt all of those BIM uses. It can take time to format, usually in a static document.
Not easy to manage, difficult to distribute, usually not collaborative, difficult to get buy-in. I know myself, I struggled people's contact list together. I'm like, okay, who's on this project? Let's start with
Who
that.
needs to buy into
Right.
it? Yeah.
And then who do I need to distribute the BIM execution plan before this BIM kickoff that I'm supposed to have?
Okay.
And then are they going to agree with that? The day of the BIM kickoff, we were kind of making those last minute agreements before the meeting in front of the subcontractors and everyone. So it was kind of like, I'm pretty sure we could have figured out a better way to
So it was
do
like
this a lot more simple.
trying to review and approve the whole thing,
Yeah.
but way too late. And
Right.
so it's difficult to get the right people involved.
Yep.
And then getting people's approval. So that one there, requiring another tool for an approval. Because it's a PDF file, it might need to be routed around with a different workflow to get people's approval.
And of course, there's all of that was a lot of administration work that
It takes a lot of time. And there are a lot of these guys. We actually stopped writing these because we ran out of space, not because we ran out of ideas. A real challenge when you're writing a scope and you're using just a text description, sometimes it's difficult to define what the inclusions and what the exclusions are. And if you're writing, for example, just the exclusions, then it could mean that you miss something and you end up unknowingly including so much more. The spreadsheets with simple numbers we've found very difficult, and you always have to refer to other areas or other guidelines. And there's lots of different standards out there.
So if they don't know the standards, and then you're trying to create an agreement with, say, owners or different parties that just don't understand, you find yourself talking about the definition as to the important things that are required on this plan.
Yeah, exactly. It's difficult to agree when everything's in lots of different places, and
you keep having to go to the dictionary to say, okay, what does this mean? What is that?
Yeah, and it's great. We all need that dictionary,
Right.
But when you're trying to deal with it in a single dimension, a spreadsheet, for example, without that database of rich knowledge behind it, it can be a real challenge. Totally disconnected from the standards and disconnected from the rest of the workflow that we see. Not simple, difficult to understand who's responsible for what, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You kind of get the idea here. And this is all culminating into, unfortunately, number 26 there. What we found was this is what happens because it's not a live document, or you're not managing to have it in a way that people can collaborate on and continue to agree on and get buy-in on. And after it gets version 1.2, for example, it then gets printed and put in the bottom drawer and then forgotten about. The implication of those challenges pretty severe. Not having a lean workflow. We talked about all of the additional time and administrative work that you would have. The end result could be confusion and misunderstanding, which leads to blame. People pointing fingers at each other. Timely decisions must be planned out. The liability that people take on, and that all is obviously risk and additional costs. So there are significant implications in not getting the plan correct. So we see this as being the wrong way of doing things. This is a challenge for our industry, and what we're really looking at is how can we get the right way. So let's move away from less awesome and let's move towards something that could be more awesome. We said, what if?
What if?
What if we could have a simple way of doing this? Yeah, what if we could combine all of those workflows and tools into one simple way of planning and agreeing and then executing the workflow?
Right. So what if we had an online version of this? We're all used to doing things online now. So let's not keep this in my network or in my local C drive. What if this was something that we can all see at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely. What if we had a head start? What if it was a framework that was defined and actually created for this specific task? Right. Not using our traditional office-based tools to try and run a BIM-based workflow. What if we could create a framework that would give us a head start?
Right. What if we had templates? So maybe I have templates already. Maybe you have templates. And maybe for those of you who are just getting started, what if there were templates available for you to just simply get started with? So not only like that last slide where you have a head start with the framework, but you actually have content, rich content that you can get started with. And now it's just a matter of adding the project information.
Cool. Yeah, that would make things easier. And then what if after you've used those templates and you are able to invite your whole team to that online and collaborative platform so that they can come along for the journey and agree on what you've just defined, including them along the creation of that document rather than it being something that gets created and has to be finished entirely before they get to see it and before they get to comment on it.
Yeah. So what if this plan that we're creating is more visual? So instead of getting lost in what is LOD 300, what is LOD 500, what if this was visual in a way where we can fully understand what content is going in, what information,
what elements do we need?
What
Like
elements,
visually being able to
who's
see what they are.
responsible. So this being very visual is just huge in a misunderstanding way.
In helping eliminate misunderstanding.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Just what you said. And then the approval workflow, we talked about it not being until the end of that document when it's finished and then being shared in some means. Maybe it would have been by email, and then you would hopefully get emails replied. Maybe there would be markup on some, maybe it would be by hand, maybe it would be in electronic form, but maybe there'd be a multitude of them in different places and in different parts of the execution plan that you'd be trying to consolidate. What if that approval workflow was built into the same environment that you were creating the document in? And what if it was smaller bite-sized chunks that you were reviewing and approving rather than waiting until the whole thing was done? And then what if you can have a live document and also archive it along the way so that you have the contractual points available to you to know that that is what you agreed on at that point in time, but also be able to update and continue to improve the live plan for the project team as things are always updating and changing on the project. And then if that culminates,
save you time. All of this, what if this could save you time?
If you had a framework with the templates, bite-sized pieces, everything was prepared,
online,
all connected together online, involving had to have buy-in. Wouldn't that save you time? That would be pretty great. And we'd be able to agree on BIM. Wouldn't it be cool, actually, if we were able to agree on BIM before we went and did all of that unnecessary BIM? What about all of the waste that we see in processes where you have two people modeling the same thing? What about when you have gaps in scope? What about if you don't follow or don't actually understand exactly what the process is for coordination, or the model is going to be used for estimating, or understanding that you don't need to go to that degree in how much detail or how far developed or how accurate that model element is when it's only going to be used for a very rough 4D simulation? What if we could agree on all of those things before we went and go modeling things unnecessarily?
That'd be great.
That would be pretty cool.
That would be awesome.
That would be awesome. So what does awesome look like? Let's take a look. How do we get started, Louis? Do you want to take us through?
Yeah, let's get started.
All right.
So I'll start from the very beginning.
That sounds good. So let's do a little bit of this. Cool.
All right. So here we're at lodplanner.com. There's this join free button. So here I'm just going to click on join.
Maybe while you're doing that, I can also talk about it.
Yeah, go for it.
So the free version, it allows you to have one project with as much planning as you would like in the plan module. There is a limit on the scope, and the only other difference is that you have a watermark on anything that's printed out. So it gives you a flavor for using the current templates and being able to build a BIM execution plan and understanding the workflow. You can use it, absolutely, but it's to try to understand more about that workflow so that you can get started. So, yeah, you're in your free account now.
Cool. So I've just logged in, created my account actually, and we have our first project to get started. A few pop-ups that let you know about 1 minute intro. There's also a 15-minute demo.
So this is like the chat down the...
Little chat bubble to ask any questions to any of our team members. And there's also a help center within your profile. So here, I'm just going to create my first project. Let's make this an office, and I am a BIM manager. And just like that, we can create our first project.
Well, that was simple.
Yeah. And some of the things that we discussed earlier were, having that framework. So here we have items such as your project information that we can add. Here we have our section for team. And very easily I can say, hey, you know what? I'm going to need Clive, and I'm going to give him some work later.
Oh man, I'm going to be an editor.
We'll invite Clive to this as my team member, and here you can add more teams. And look,
cool.
Clive already has his own account, and the system recognized him. And
all my contact details. So if you were to click on that card, you'd see my contact details as well.
All right. So here, now it's about getting started. So we can either create our first plan sections, or we can add. So I'm just.
And this is from templates, yeah?
Yeah, add from our templates. We can add from the example template that everyone has access to, or even some other templates from the global tab. Here, I'm going to open up the examples and select all of these items. I can browse through them, select or not select. Let's say, for instance, in this case, we don't need any phase planning or cost estimation on this project. We can be more selective when we choose.
So this could be templates from the template library, or you could build your own templates and they would be available as well.
Right. So if I already had my own sections, I can hit create and start copying and pasting from any other documents that I already have.
Very cool.
So as you can see here, I've brought in all of these items, drag and drop features. Just to reorder them, we can simply select.
So when you drag and drop, you don't have to go and renumber anything. It's going to renumber and it's going to change the order for you as you move those around.
Right.
Cool.
So since these are templates, we can.
Well, those guys keep bugging you with help, don't they?
Yeah. So since they are templates, we can now just edit and modify what we need for this specific project. And there's the approval feature that we talked about earlier, approving these one by one.
And I see that there's a little message bubble.
Right.
What's that?
So not only can we see the activities.
Like I know nothing about this.
Not only can we see the activities, but we can also comment. So reducing the amount of emails between team members and keeping all of those discussions in one place per section has been really useful.
This is a really beneficial feature for users where instead of having to push one PDF around for a workflow of approvals and what usually comes back is a set of comments and a rewrite and trying to manage that workflow, all of the feedback is targeted for each section, and you can then go and edit. And just to clarify, editors can propose, and then managers on a project can approve. Yeah, so you're a manager because you've created this project, but me as an editor, I could go in and I could start commenting or writing, and then okay, great.
All right, so we've created our plan. Now let's jump into the scope. All right, so here, this is our scope module. So very similar as to how you can get started. You can either add from your templates or start creating your scope packages from scratch. So here it has a similar feel. You can select from past projects. Right now, we're going to select from our example project, the foundation scope. And what this would bring in.
So you can have architectural, mechanical, and
so
these are predefined packages of scope?
Right.
Okay.
So what this has brought in, milestones that were already predefined in that example project. It brought in the scope systems at the LODs that we have already defined.
Along with all of the elements that have been selected or not selected in those, yeah.
Also looking at who's responsible. So here it automatically created those teams such as the architectural team, the structural team. All of that information that you've already done in your template has been transferred over to this one to quickly create this next project.
Very cool.
Now we can start saying, okay, well, maybe at the retaining walls need to be in LOD 200 in the design development phase as well, maybe the structural slabs as well. So we can now start modifying this for this specific project.
Very cool. And then I see a couple of locks at the bottom on the left-hand side.
Right.
So that's just showing in scope. In the free mode, you can see and start to understand how this module will apply and how you can define your scope packages. But there is a limit of 3 scope packages with 3 systems in each of those. So you can get an idea of it, and if you would like to upgrade, then simply clicking on the blue bar at the top, you can upgrade and start to use the scope module as well. We have teams that just use the plan module. We have some teams that just use the scope module. Most are using across both of those, and also some into the flow module that you'll show later. But essentially being able to use the parts of the application, parts of the platform that you need, that's all you need to pay for.
So one more thing I'd wanted to bring up is here you have some set of toolbars to add teams, add assignments.
So that's like doing it really quickly,
right.
Yeah, by click, click, click.
Add information requirements, those can also be specified to these systems and elements, and then some view preferences that you can select. Here I want to show you that we can open up these systems to view the elements. So here we can be more flexible, more specific, more clear. So we mentioned clear scopes is something that is not always defined correctly.
So I'm just going to have a look here. So if we look at the 400 being fabrication level, we can really start to see where we would be able to turn these on and off. You can see this updating in the grid above when I turn these on and off. And that's just being able to take the power of visual scoping and building exactly what you need for that BIM use. So each one of those columns is a BIM use. Depending on what you're building the model for, you might or might not need certain elements, certain amount of detail in those elements, and certain amount of development of the overall set of elements, and who is responsible, and then also information. So we don't really have time because we are running out of time, but adding information requirements is also something that maybe just quickly showing that. So in the tools as well, this is a big driver for owners nowadays. You could search, find something along the lines of what you're needing.
So here we are searching for warranty. We want to add the warranty end and start date to these. And now we can select what elements we want to define those in.
It might be more applicable for a boiler or a tank or an air conditioning unit or something like that. But being able to assign these en masse, and that will then form part of the report.
Right. And finally, obviously, we still need the traditional PDF format. So let's see what that would look like.
Yeah, so this is where you get the best of both worlds. At the moment, there's no documents in that list, but you can create documents in here.
Right, so let's print out the plan first.
Just print one document, maybe, yeah.
Yeah. So let's print out our first
contract.
And here we're going to select what we'd like to add. Let's select the plan contents, the scope summary, and the scope details, so we can see what that looks like.
Cool.
We can also define what milestones we want to print with those scope details. Let's
either leave it or do it.
Yep.
And then you can also see some locks in there. So this is in the free mode again, being able to unlock the cover page and the headers and being able to change certain things and look and feel. They're all settings in the paid mode.
So what we're doing now is basically doing a condensed version of what we have in the app.
Yeah, there we go. So we have a cover page to it, which is completely customizable when you are in the paid versions.
Mm-hmm. Here's our contents that we've defined in our plan module. And there is all of the contents. And we'll scroll all the way down to our scope summary. So here is that condensed scope summary that we've defined, seeing the responsibilities, the LODs, and then a breakdown of that. Here we can see who's responsible for those elements, at what package they were created, and at what milestone they were required, including those information requirements such as the warranty details that we've added. And some of these details were already predefined because we brought those in from our template.
Right. Yeah, so it was as quick as that to create a document that can be shared to the project team, and that can either be sent to them or they can have access, and now when they go into the PDFs, they can see here that Louis just created this document and it's available when it was timestamped.
So whether you are on the free version Or on a paid version, you do get unlimited viewers. So unlimited viewers can be invited to access this information. They can have access to the archived documents that have already been printed by other editors and managers, right? So what's the flow module, you ask?
I was just going to say, what's the flow module, Louis?
So we've already defined our plan and our scope. So what's a way to keep this live? What's a way to keep this going?
How do you make sure that those tasks get done?
So all of those items we've defined in the scope have automatically been created as scope tasks.
And then I just picked the handover on the right-hand side as the milestone that we want to look at.
Right.
And we could start to see here some of those tasks. So you've got all of the checklist items. If we open it up, we can assign it to a specific person. Unfortunately, maybe I'll get that assignment. And then
told you I was going to give
due
you
dates. And then you can start defining this and adding attachments, and whether they're the handover documents or whatever you would like on these cards. And then start to drag and drop them. Really gives you a way of managing those tasks to completion rather than just not being able to see what the status is and being able to understand who is responsible and when they're supposed to carry it out.
It's been really helpful for some weekly or bi-weekly coordination meetings I've seen from some of our customers.
And then on the coordination side, so some of the design teams that are using this, they're actually using, so let's look at the coordination milestone and just print those as filtered cards. So here you can see those cards that can be used in a pull planning workflow, a pull planning session. You can see the responsibility, you can see who's actually supposed to be carrying this out, what it is, and an image, and then a box for them to write in. And so you can use those in the pull planning.
We've already defined the scope for this project, so why are we handing out blank sticky notes to our plumbing subcontractor?
Right.
Let's give them these.
They're already assigned, they're already agreed.
Give them,
It's part of the contract.
Exactly. And let's not forget that this column is very customizable, so in progress, completed, and approved are just some defined default columns.
We can add as many columns or manage this workflow.
Yeah.
Some people like to, instead of just saying in progress, make it week 1, week 2, week 3, etc. And then you can manage these cards as you would like. So each one of these, all of this is very customizable. Yep. Just quickly recap. We built a plan so we can see all of the information about the project and the teams. We actually see the teams that were brought in from that scope package that we brought in. We can see all the way through everything from the software versions and the hardware and everything, how we're going to manage coordinates, etc. The scope, we saw how we build out a scope and how we would adjust that scope. And then we looked at printing and being able to have a contract. And then we looked at how we can manage those tasks to completion. Really, really very simple. And there's our first project. Anything else to? No, it's that simple. It's that simple.